You know, I've been asked before what kind of stories I like to write most, like what kind of genre or style of story I like to write most. Do I like romance, horror, fantasy, science fiction, stuff like that? And it's a hard question to answer because I kind of like to dabble in as many genres as I can to kind of see what I enjoy most. And if I had to say which ones I enjoy most, I really do enjoy writing fantasy. Fantasy can be very, very fun and entertaining. I love building magic systems or world building or character designs or different races and species and creatures. I mean, all these kind of things are very fun for me. And I admit that part of the problem with doing that is it does tend to lend itself more towards the teen or even young adult style of audience, but I do like to experiment and branch out and try other styles of storytelling, including gritty or realistic or even mature styles of stories. And one of those stories that I'm very proud of and continuing to work on to this day is Shogun of Crime. Shogun of Crime was a story I came up with a long time ago that I really wanted to pursue and explore because I thought that it would be a very fun little experiment with myself to see if I could write a story like this, but also an exploration of my own understanding and research on history. So here's basically how I came up with the story, and here's how the story goes. So how I came up with it is this. I am a huge fan and lover of Japanese history. In fact, when I was in college, I took whole courses on Asian history. And one thing that I really thought would be fun was, what if I told the story of Oda Nobunaga, the famous daimyo who was considered one of the great unifiers of Japan, and tell his story from the time he started his unification all the way up to his death and beyond, and talk about how that looked and what that looked like. But I didn't just want to retell his history. I thought, let's do something more creative than that. So what I did was I am telling the story of a mob boss, a criminal underworld boss, who basically is the stand-in for Nobunaga. I'm telling Nobunaga's story from this mob boss's perspective, and all the characters and all the events within this story are all basically reflections of everything Oda Nobunaga went through. So if the character in this story deals with a certain problem or issue, it's just like an issue Nobunaga dealt with, only in a more modern context within a city rather than a whole country. So I was trying to retell the story of Oda Nobunaga from this unique perspective. And I'll be honest, this was a very, very fun idea, but I wanted to go even further. I wanted to make it as unique and fun as I possibly could. So I decided to try this. I made the main character a woman named Oichi Taiga. And now I named her after Oda Nobunaga's real sister named Oichi. And I thought what I do is I tell the story of this young woman, Oichi, who came to Japan. She's the daughter of a Yakuza boss, and she is going to be married to a mafia boss so that way their families can merge and work together and both mutually benefit. But when she gets to New Murcia, which is the name of the city, she meets her soon-to-be husband and realizes he is a lazy, no good layabout who is not worth her time, respect, or attention. She also learns that the city is in the midst of absolute turmoil, chaos, and pandemonium. You got a bunch of gangs that are fighting each other to gain dominance in the underworld. The police are just as corrupt as the gangs half the time, picking their sides and helping whoever they want. And the people who suffer are the citizens and the average people. So Uichi decides, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fix this. I'm going to actually try to bring stability by taking over the underworld. So after she kills her husband-to-be and takes over his crime family after their marriage, she immediately gets to work, fixing up the crime family, turning it into the Taiga Syndicate, and actually working to either defeat or assimilate other crime families and groups and gangs into her own, and basically start cleaning up the streets of New Murcia. Along the way, she has to deal with rival gangs. She has to deal with turmoil within her own group. She has to deal with the police. She's got a lot of stuff going on. And each of the gangs I kind of saw being like a representation of different daimyos or clans that Nobunaga himself had to deal with in his vie for power. One thing that I thought was very fun was involving Tokugawa, because if you know Japanese history, Oda Nobunaga was very close allies with Tokugawa Ieyasu. And because of their alliance, that's what really helped Oda Nobunaga get as far as he did. But I didn't know how I wanted to do this until I came up with an idea that I thought would be very fun. I created Tokugawa to be a cop by the name of Todd, okay? And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this cop ended up meeting Oichi, and the two actually started a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And Oichi at first is just, he doesn't know that she's a gang leader. He doesn't know that she's the leader of the Taiga Syndicate. He's just a beat cop. He doesn't know all that. He just thinks that she's a really nice Japanese girl who's moved into town and he wants to date her. She has fallen in love with him because, he's handsome, he's sweet, he's compassionate. But she also has to explain to her gang why she's even spending time with a cop. So she's got to go like, I'm using him for his information. He's an insider in the police. I can use that. I can take advantage of that. Even though most of her lieutenants are kind of like, oh yeah, sure, whatever you say. But that's her excuse. But over time, he starts to piece things together. She gets worried about what he'll do when what she'll do when he finds out, and whether or not he'll sell her out. That kind of thing. There's a lot of fun that I've had with this. I've had fun exploring different aspects of history and how that relates to Oichi and what she has to deal with, like some of the things that she has to fight, some of the things she has to deal with, some of the problems she has to face and how she solves them. It's been a lot of fun. The story is currently on pause because I've hit a point that I'm not sure how to progress, because I know historically what happens to Oda at this point, but I'm not sure how to approach it for Oichi, so I'm still working that out. But once I figure it out, I will write the chapter. Now, as always, I want to talk about the goods and the bads of the story, because it's not enough for me to tell you about the stories. I want you to know what I've learned from them. So what's the good of the story? I really had a great deal of fun designing Oichi. It was very fun for me and very inventive to be able to take historical accuracy and history and apply it to a modern day setting and just get creative with it. I thought that this was a great way to get creative juices flowing. Writing Oichi was a great deal of fun. It's great to create a girl boss character who actually makes sense to be a girl boss character. I learned very much, what it takes to create an intimidating figure who may not be as physically intimidating as those around her. I also had fun with a lot of romance here because, of course, Todd and Oichi strike off a romance, and writing a romance from a young woman's perspective was kind of unique. I had not done that very often, if at all. I can't remember any period where I had written from that perspective, but it was kind of unique looking at this from her perspective and what she might look for in a man, because that's not what I look for. So it was kind of like, how do you look at that? I actually had to talk to my mom and my cousin and some of my female friends and say, what do you look for in a man? What would be a way that a man would behave that you would find appealing or attractive, and actually try to get a sense from them about what they would find attractive or appealing in a man's behavior or attitude, and I had to apply that. So it was a great opportunity for me to try something new. However, I will be honest, there were some problems with the story along the way. For one thing, I did fall into a couple of bad habits with the story. One of them very much being the girl boss kind of tropes, like Oichi just being really strong, really skilled at a lot of what she does, already very knowledgeable of the underworld. Yes, it's true that she grew up in the Yakuza, but to already understand the inner workings of a gang without much time, that was a little hard to stomach. Also, there was the fact that Oichi's from Japan, and even though she knows English, I didn't write her with much of a broken English. And I know some people might say, well, wouldn't that be stereotypical? Yes, but it makes more sense for her to struggle with English. So as I went back and rewrote some of the chapters, I had a little bit more fun because I could actually say, okay, what if she actually didn't understand this turn of phrase? Like, because a lot of the gangbangers that she works with talk with a lot of slang and slurs and stuff like that, and she may not understand the words or verbatim, and that may surprise her. So I thought that would be very funny, but that meant that I had to go back and rework that. The other big problem I had with the story, there were actually two major problems. One of them actually hurt the story in a big way, was the fact that I tried very hard to make this a very gritty, mature, realistic kind of story. And that meant that sometimes I used language and descriptors that some may find uncomfortable. In fact, there was one incident where I was reading the story live in a stream to my audience, and yes, there is a slur. There is a slur in one of the stories because the character, being who they are, would use a slur, and I got raked over the coals for saying the slur in the thing. And so I had to weigh with myself, do I use this, even though the character, it would make sense for them to use a slur, do I still have them say it? Or do I censor myself, even though that's exactly what the character would say in the situation? That was something that I had to weigh with myself, and I'm still not entirely sure if I like how that went. It goes back to that issue I had with Metamorphosis, which I talked about before. How much of myself do I have to censor or work off of in order to make the story appealing to the audience, and how much do I have to just say, I'm going to write what I want, whatever the case. So That was one of the other problems. The second major problem is when you go down a mature or adult style path of a story, you do need to make sure that you rein in some of the things that you want to do. For example, I did not write any sex scenes or anything like that, but I did write murder scenes. Like, I wrote scenes where characters did murder or kill. And in some cases, I had to describe, like, the intent to murder, the desire to draw blood, the desire to kill, stuff like that. And sometimes in the doing of that, that made me a little uncomfortable. And that made me question, should I pursue that? No. How would the audience react to that? Shogun of Crime has been basically a tightrope walk. It's very rewarding, very exhilarating, very fun to write. But there's also this sense of dread. Like, since this is a mature style of story, what constitutes maturity? But how far can I go with maturity before it becomes obscenity? You know what I mean? And as a Christian writer myself, it's kind of like, man, that's a tough line to walk sometimes. It's kind of like, it kind of goes back to what my buddy Jay said. My buddy Jay's this really great artist, and he has said one of the struggles he has is when he draws women. Sometimes he will draw a super attractive looking woman, and after he's done with the drawing, he'll kind of question, like, did I draw her too attractive? Like, because she's kind of like really, really attractive. Did I go too far? And that's kind of the same thing I have with Shogun of Crime. Did I make this too mature? I know it's supposed to be realistic, but did I go too far? And that's something that I've had to wrestle with this story. But that's all the time I have on this. Thank you guys for watching. What do you think about Shogun of Crime? Let me know what you think of the story and the concept in the comments down below. Would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.